It was an ordinary evening in a small city cafe where people came to relax after work. The smell of coffee and baked bread filled the air, mixing with the quiet hum of soft background music. Behind the counter, a tired waitress moved quickly from one table to another, serving dishes with a polite smile even though her legs ached. She had been working since early morning, and every part of her body felt heavy, but she never let it show. She had a reason to keep going. A little boy sitting quietly at the corner table waiting for her. The boy was about 6 or 7, wearing a slightly faded sweater and holding a pencil in his hand. He was drawing on a napkin, sketching small figures and musical notes as if lost in his own world. He didn't complain or ask for much. Every once in a while, he looked toward his mother, catching her eye just long enough to give her a small smile before she hurried off again to serve another customer. It was a routine they both knew well. She worked, he waited. It wasn't easy, but they had each other, and that was enough. That evening, the cafe wasn't like usual. The owner had rented the place for a private charity dinner. It was filled with well-dressed guests, expensive perfumes, and elegant laughter. Waiters moved carefully, carrying glasses of wine and plates that looked too fancy to eat. The waitress felt out of place among them, but she kept her head down and worked the way she always did, focused, polite, invisible. Among the guests was a man who drew quiet attention from everyone around him. He wasn't loud or showy, but people whispered his name with respect. He was a billionaire, known for his investments and for helping many charities. Most of the cafe staff didn't even recognize him, but those who did tried to appear calm. The waitress had no idea who he was. To her, he was just another customer at another table, one of many she had to please that night. As the evening went on, the boy at the corner table finished his drawing and started to look around. His eye stopped on the shiny black piano in the corner of the cafe. It was a large instrument, polished so clean that the lights from the ceiling reflected off it. The cafe usually kept it locked, but tonight it stood open, waiting for one of the scheduled performers to play during the event. The boy couldn't take his eyes off it. He had seen pianos only in pictures and on television, but never up close. His small fingers twitched as if they already wanted to touch the keys. When his mother finally came near his table to refill his water glass, he whispered, "Can I touch it?" Just once, she froze, looking at him and then at the piano. Her first thought was fear. She could lose her job if someone complained. This wasn't the kind of night for taking chances. She shook her head gently, whispering, "No, not now, sweetheart. Maybe later." But his eyes stayed on the piano, bright with curiosity, and it broke her heart to deny him something so small. She brushed his hair with her hand, then returned to work, hoping he'd forget about it. The billionaire noticed the exchange. He had been quietly observing everything, the way the woman worked tirelessly without a single complaint, the way the boy waited patiently, and the small connection between them that said more than words ever could. He didn't interrupt or say anything. He just watched, his mind turning over something quietly. After a while, the dinner crowd became louder. Glasses clinked, people laughed, and music played from a small speaker. The waitress carried a tray filled with heavy dishes. She was crossing the room when she saw her son again. He was no longer sitting quietly. He was standing near the piano, one hand on the bench, looking at her with pleading eyes. She froze for a moment, torn between fear and love. Then something inside her softened. Maybe it was the exhaustion, or maybe it was a mother's instinct that told her. Some moments are too precious to let slip away. She looked around quickly. The other waiters were busy, the guests were distracted, and no one seemed to notice him yet. Slowly, she walked over to him, wiped her hands on her apron, and whispered, "Okay, just one touch, only for a second." The boy's face lit up with a joy so pure that it melted her tiredness for a moment. She carefully lifted him up and placed him on the piano bench. His small feet dangled above the floor, his hands hovering above the keys like he was afraid to break them. At first, he pressed a few random keys, soft notes that blended with the noise of the cafe. The sound caught a few ears, but no one turned to look. Then he pressed another combination, and suddenly something changed. The notes began to flow in a rhythm, gentle and steady. His fingers moved more confidently, remembering sounds he had heard long ago when his father used to play on an old keyboard before he passed away. The melody wasn't perfect, but it was full of emotion, innocent, pure, and sincere. One by one, the conversations in the cafe began to fade. The laughter slowed. A few guests turned their heads, wondering where the music was coming from. When they saw the little boy playing, they fell silent. Even the waiters stopped walking. The billionaire leaned back in his chair, eyebrows raised, his eyes softening. The notes coming from the piano were not practiced or polished, they came from the heart. The boy's mother stood beside him, one hand over her mouth, tears forming in her eyes as she realized what she was hearing. It was the same tune her late husband used to play every night to make their baby fall asleep. The boy played on, completely unaware of the crowd watching him. His head tilted slightly as he lost himself in the music. Every key he touched filled the air with warmth and something unexplainable, something that made strangers feel connected for a brief moment. The billionaire's heart, which had seen the cold side of business and power for years, felt something stir inside. It reminded him of his own childhood, of simpler days when his mother used to sing lullabies beside an old piano. The last note lingered in the air, soft and trembling, before fading into silence. For a moment, no one moved. The cafe stood still as if holding its breath. Then suddenly a wave of applause broke out. People stood from their chairs, clapping and cheering. Some even had tears in their eyes. The waitress couldn't believe what was happening. Her son turned toward her, confused but smiling, his cheeks red. She hugged him tightly, whispering, "That was beautiful," unable to stop her tears. The billionaire stood up slowly, still clapping. He exchanged glances with a few of the guests who looked equally moved. He didn't say anything right away. Instead, he walked to the counter, paid for his meal, and then quietly asked the cafe manager about the woman and the child. The manager explained that she was a single mother, working double shifts to make ends meet. The billionaire nodded thoughtfully, his eyes following the pair as they stood by the piano. When the applause finally faded, the woman hurried to apologize to the guests, thinking she might have caused trouble, but the reactions were the opposite. People came up to her, smiling, praising her son's talent. Some even asked if he took lessons. She smiled shyly and shook her head. "No," she said softly. "He just listens and remembers." The billionaire overheard those words and felt something click in his mind. As the evening came to an end, guests started leaving, still talking about the little boy who had played so beautifully. The billionaire waited until the crowd thinned out. Then he walked toward the waitress and her son. The woman froze, unsure how to act around such an important-looking man. She started to apologize again, but he raised a gentle hand. "There's nothing to apologize for," he said kindly. "Your son has something special." She didn't know what to say. He asked the boy a few simple questions. How old he was, if he liked playing music, if he had a piano at home. The boy answered honestly and shyly, saying he didn't have one but sometimes made his own keyboard out of paper to practice. The billionaire smiled softly, a rare kind of smile that came from deep thought rather than amusement. He reached into his pocket, took out a business card, and handed it to the mother. "Call this number tomorrow," he said. "I'd like to talk more about your son." The woman hesitated, unsure whether to trust him, but there was something sincere in his tone. She took the card carefully and nodded. Before leaving, he placed his hand gently on the boy's shoulder and said, "Keep playing, young man. Don't ever stop." Then he walked out of the cafe, leaving everyone watching in silence. As the mother looked at the card in her hand, she felt both nervous and curious. She didn't know that the man who had just spoken to her was one of the richest men in the country. All she knew was that something about that night felt different, as if life had quietly opened a new door she didn't even know existed. Her son yawned, resting his head against her arm, and she smiled, whispering, "Let's go home." Outside, the night was calm, the city lights glowing softly on the wet streets. She held his small hand as they walked away from the cafe, not realizing that the simple moment she lifted her son to the piano had just changed both their lives forever. The next morning felt like any other. The smell of breakfast filled the small apartment, and sunlight slipped through the thin curtains, landing on the table where the little boy sat, carefully folding paper into tiny squares. His mother moved around the small kitchen, trying to get ready for another long day at the cafe. She poured a bit of tea into an old mug and sat across from him for a short moment of peace before leaving. She couldn't stop thinking about the night before. The way everyone had fallen silent, The applause that came after, the kind words from that important-looking man. It all felt like a dream. The small business card he had given her was still in her apron pocket. She had taken it out a few times during the night, staring at the simple black letters printed on it. There was no big logo, just a name and a number. She didn't know whether to call or not. Maybe he was just being polite. People often said nice things they didn't really mean. Maybe he'd already forgotten about them. She was used to being invisible in a world that moved too fast. Still, something about his calm voice and the look in his eyes made her wonder if it was worth trying. As she left for work, she kissed her son on the forehead and promised she'd be back early. The boy nodded, clutching his paper piano, the one he had drawn with lines for keys. He didn't fully understand what had happened last night, but he remembered how the music made people smile, and that was enough to make him happy. At the cafe, things were quieter than usual. The charity event had been a big success, and everyone was still talking about it. The other waiters teased her gently about her son's unexpected performance. Some even said they had never seen the guests so emotional before. She laughed softly, pretending not to care too much, but inside she was proud. Proud and a little scared. When she took a break, she pulled out the card again and turned it over in her hand. Finally, she decided to step outside and use her old phone to call the number. Her heart pounded as the line rang. For a moment, she thought no one would answer. Then a calm voice picked up. "Hello? Hello, this is the waitress from the cafe last night," she said nervously. "You gave me your card." "Ah, yes," the man replied warmly. "I was hoping you'd call. How are you and your son today?" The simple question took her by surprise. No one ever asked her that. She stuttered for a moment before saying, "We're fine, thank you. I just wanted to say thank you for your kindness last night." "I meant what I said," he continued. "Your son has a gift. I want to help him, if you'll let me. Can you bring him to my office tomorrow morning? I'd like to introduce you both to someone." She didn't know what to say. Her first instinct was to refuse. Things like this didn't happen to people like her. She had no nice clothes, no car, and certainly no reason to visit a billionaire's office. But there was something in his voice that didn't sound like pity. It sounded genuine, as if he had already made up his mind. I'll think about it," she said quietly. "Please do," he said. "I'll have someone send you the address." When the call ended, she stood there for a moment, feeling the cool morning breeze on her face. She didn't realize she'd been holding her breath. She slipped the phone back into her pocket and went inside, her heart racing. That night, after putting her son to bed, she sat by the small window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. She thought about all the times she had promised herself she would give her boy a better life, and all the times she had failed. Maybe this was a sign, a small chance, something worth taking. The next morning, she dressed her son in his cleanest shirt and tied his shoelaces tightly. He was excited, asking again and again where they were going. She smiled and said softly, "Just somewhere special." Then they took the bus, sitting quietly among strangers, holding hands the entire way. When they arrived at the large glass building, she almost turned back. Everything about it felt too big, too far from her world. The floors were shiny, the air smelled of perfume and polished wood, and people walked quickly in neat clothes. She felt out of place in her worn shoes and simple dress, but before she could say anything, a kind-looking assistant approached them. "You must be the lady from the cafe," the woman said with a warm smile. "Please come with me. He's expecting you." They were led into a wide office with tall windows overlooking the city. The billionaire stood near the piano in the corner, a beautiful grand piano that glowed softly in the morning light. He turned as they entered, smiling politely. "I'm glad you came," he said. The mother nodded shyly. Her son hid slightly behind her, peeking curiously at the piano. "I wanted to see your boy again," the man said kindly. "Would you like to play something for me?" The boy hesitated. His mother looked down at him and whispered, "Go ahead, sweetheart." Just like before. He slowly walked up to the piano bench and climbed on. The man stood quietly nearby, watching as those small fingers touched the keys. At first, the boy pressed softly, uncertain, but soon the sound filled the room again, pure, emotional, untrained, but full of life. It was as if he spoke through the keys. When the music stopped, the room stayed quiet for a moment. The man exhaled deeply, then turned toward the mother. "He's remarkable," he said. "There's something very special in the way he plays. He doesn't just play notes, and he tells stories through them. The mother's eyes watered. "We don't have a piano," she said softly. "He listens to old recordings sometimes and plays on paper at home." "I never had money for lessons." The man nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "That's exactly why I asked you here. I'd like to offer him a scholarship. Full support for his education at one of the best music schools in the country. And a piano, of course. Every artist needs their instrument." The mother blinked, unsure if she'd heard right. A scholarship? "For him?" "Yes," he said. "I believe he deserves it. There's no reason talent like that should go unnoticed." Her lips trembled. She looked at her son, who was running his fingers along the piano keys as if tracing a dream. She wanted to speak, to thank him, but words wouldn't come out. He smiled softly. "You don't need to thank me. Just promise me one thing. Let him keep playing. Don't let life get in the way of his music." Tears rolled down her cheeks before she could stop them. She nodded quickly, whispering, "I promise." Over the next few days, her life changed in ways she couldn't have imagined. People from the Billionaire's team helped arrange everything. A small piano was delivered to their apartment, and soon after, the boy began attending private lessons at a nearby studio. His teachers were amazed by how quickly he learned. He didn't need sheet music at first. He played by ear, copying sounds and turning them into something beautiful. The boy would sit for hours, his fingers moving gracefully, sometimes smiling, sometimes closing his eyes as if lost in a dream. His mother often stood by the doorway just watching. Every note reminded her that the struggle had been worth it. Every sleepless night, every long shift, every quiet tear. The billionaire visited them once during those early weeks. He came without any announcement, bringing a small bouquet of flowers for the mother. She was nervous at first, unsure how to treat a man of his status, but he waved off her formalities. "I didn't come as a businessman today," he said kindly. "Just as someone who believes in your son." They talked for a while about the boy's progress, about how music seemed to come naturally to him. The billionaire listened carefully, nodding. "Some people spend years trying to feel what he already feels," he said. "Music doesn't just come from talent, it comes from the heart." He understands that. As the days turned into weeks, word began to spread about the little boy who played like a prodigy. Videos from the cafe performance began to circulate online after one of the guests uploaded it. People were moved by the sight of a small child playing with such depth and emotion. The story of the waitress and her son began to touch hearts everywhere. But for them, life stayed simple. They still lived in the same small apartment, still ate breakfast together at the same table. The only difference was that now, every morning began with music, soft notes filling the air like sunlight. The mother sometimes thought back to that night in the cafe, when she lifted her son onto the piano bench. She had done it without thinking, just following her heart, and that single act had opened a door she never thought existed. She didn't know what the future would bring, but she knew one thing for sure. Her son's gift was no longer hidden. And somewhere deep inside, she felt a quiet faith that life was about to take them somewhere beyond anything they had ever imagined. Days turned into weeks, and weeks slowly turned into months. Life for the mother and her little boy began to change in quiet but meaningful ways. Their home still looked the same, small, warm, and filled with second-hand furniture, but it felt lighter somehow. The sound of music filled the air each morning, soft notes echoing through the narrow hallways of the building. Neighbors would sometimes stop outside their door, listening for a few seconds before smiling and walking away. The mother had never been the kind of woman people noticed much, but now she noticed the small changes. The nods, the smiles, even a few kind words from strangers. It was all because of her son. Every day after school he would sit by the piano and play. Sometimes he practiced the pieces his new teacher assigned. Other times he played his own melodies, tunes that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside him. His small fingers had grown stronger, moving faster and with more confidence. The mother would often stop whatever she was doing just to watch. There was something in his music that reached her heart every single time. The billionaire who had helped them kept his promise too. He never interfered or made them feel small. He checked in occasionally. His kindness was quiet and genuine, the kind that didn't need to be shown off. One evening, as the mother was closing the cafe, the billionaire arrived unexpectedly. He wasn't surrounded by cameras or assistants, just walked in quietly like an ordinary customer. She felt nervous seeing him again, unsure if she should speak first. He smiled and gestured for her to sit. "I just came to check how you're both doing," he said kindly. "I hear from his teacher that he's improving quickly." She nodded, still trying to process that someone so powerful cared enough to ask about her son. "He practices every day," she said softly. "Sometimes he forgets to eat because he's so focused." The man chuckled. "That's a good sign," he said. "That means he loves it." He paused for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "I'm hosting a small charity event next month," he continued. "There will be guests from the music world, teachers, musicians, people who can help open more doors for him. I'd like him to play there if you agree." The mother's eyes widened. "Play in front of all those people?" "Yes," he said gently. "He doesn't need to do much, just play what he feels. The rest will take care of itself." She hesitated. Her son had never played in front of a large crowd before. He was still so young. But then she remembered how calm and fearless he'd been that first night in the cafe. Something inside her told her this was meant to happen. When she told her son that evening, he didn't say much. He just looked at her, a mixture of excitement and nervousness in his eyes, and asked, "Do you think they'll like my music?" She smiled, brushing his hair back. "They'll love it. Just play with your heart like you always do." The following weeks were filled with preparation. The boy practiced longer than ever, sometimes until his fingers were sore. His teacher guided him gently, but most of what he did came naturally. He didn't memorize songs. He lived them. Each note seemed to tell a piece of his story. The long nights in the cafe, the sound of his mother's footsteps, the warmth of her tired smile. The night of the event finally arrived. The venue was grand, a tall hall with golden lights and rows of elegant chairs. The mother felt completely out of place among the polished guests in their suits and gowns. She held her son's hand tightly, afraid she might lose him in the crowd. The billionaire greeted them warmly and introduced them to a few people, all smiling politely. But the mother could barely speak. Her heart pounded as she looked around, wondering how her little boy would handle this. Backstage, the boy sat quietly on a small stool, staring at the piano through the curtain. His hands were shaking slightly. The mother knelt beside him, whispering, "Remember, it's just like at home. Close your eyes if you need to. It's just you and the music." He nodded slowly. When his name was announced, the room went silent. The boy walked to the piano, small and serious, his feet barely touching the floor when he sat down. The audience watched curiously, some expecting a short, cute performance, others simply unsure what to think of a child playing at such an event. Then, the first note sounded. It was soft, almost hesitant, but within seconds the melody began to bloom. It wasn't a famous piece or something he had memorized. It was his own creation, a gentle and emotional tune that filled the hall like a whisper that turned into a song. The room grew still. The billionaire leaned forward in his seat, a faint smile on his face. The mother stood at the side, her eyes wide with pride and disbelief. The music carried something no words could express, a mixture of innocence and wisdom, pain and hope. By the time the last note faded, many in the audience were visibly moved. There was a brief pause, that small moment of silence that comes before emotion fully catches up. And then the applause began. It started softly, then grew louder, until the entire hall was clapping. The boy looked up, confused at first, then smiled shyly. The billionaire stood, clapping with everyone else, and the mother felt tears run down her cheeks. She had never been prouder in her life. Her son, the boy who once played on napkins, had now filled a grand hall with music that touched hearts. After the performance, many people came to speak with the billionaire, praising the boy's talent. A few music directors and teachers even offered to meet him for future opportunities. The mother could hardly believe what she was hearing. Everything was happening so fast, faster than she could ever have imagined. The billionaire found them later in a quiet corner. He looked at the boy and said softly, "You did something very special tonight. You reminded everyone why music matters." The boy smiled shyly, holding his mother's hand. "I just played what I felt," he said simply. "That's the best kind of music," the man replied. From that night on, things began to change again. Not with luxury or fame, but with opportunity. The boy was invited to play at other small events, and each time more people noticed his gift. Journalists began writing small articles about him, calling him a young prodigy with the heart of an old soul. Videos of his performances started to circulate online, but despite all the attention, life at home remained humble. The mother made sure he stayed grounded. They still took the bus, still ate simple meals, and still laughed about small things. She didn't want him to lose the innocence that made his music so special. One afternoon, as they returned home from practice, she found a letter waiting at their door. It was from a prestigious music school in another city, offering a full scholarship for the boy to study there. She sat down on the couch, the letter shaking in her hands. It was everything she had ever dreamed of. Yet the thought of letting him go made her heart ache. That night, when she told him, he stayed quiet for a long time. Finally, he looked at her and asked softly, "Would you be sad if I went?" She forced a smile even as her throat tightened. "I'd miss you every day," she said. "But I'd be the happiest mother in the world knowing you're doing what you love." The boy hugged her tightly, whispering, "Then I'll play every day for you. Even if you can't hear me, I'll still be playing for you." The billionaire helped arrange everything, the paperwork, the travel, the school. Before they left, he visited them one last time. He spoke gently to the mother, assuring her that her son would be well cared for. "He has something the world needs to hear," he said. "You gave him his wings. Now let him fly," she nodded, tears filling her eyes again. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." When the day came for the boy to leave, the mother stood at the train station holding his hand until the very last second. He waved from the window as the train began to move. She waved back, forcing a smile even as her heart felt like it was breaking. The music had brought them so far, from the small cafe to the shining stage, from quiet corners to grand halls. And though they were apart now, she knew that every time he touched those piano keys, a part of her would be there with him, carried in every note he played. And somewhere in the distance, sitting in his office with the city lights behind him, the billionaire smiled to himself, thinking of the night when a waitress lifted her son to a piano and unknowingly set into motion a story that would one day move the world. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of change and quiet discovery. The boy had settled into his new school, a place filled with pianos, music sheets, and teachers who watched him with awe. Even though he was young, he fit in seamlessly. His fingers, once small and tentative, moved over the keys with confidence and purpose. Each day he grew more curious, more fearless, and more determined to learn. The mother adjusted slowly to this new rhythm. She had left her cafe job behind, trusting the billionaire's network to help them navigate this unfamiliar world. Some mornings were still hard, waking up early, arranging lessons, helping her son prepare for the day. But each evening, when she heard the music drifting through their practice room, she felt a quiet joy she had never known before. It wasn't wealth or fame that mattered. It was this: seeing him grow into the person he was meant to be. One afternoon, she walked into the practice room and found her son playing a piece that he had written himself. His brow was furrowed in concentration, and his hands moved almost automatically, creating a melody that was both playful and haunting at the same time. She stopped at the doorway, watching silently. She couldn't believe how far he had come in such a short time. The room seemed to glow with his energy, a warmth that touched her in ways words never could. "Mother," he said suddenly, noticing her, "listen to this part." She moved closer, sitting on the edge of the bench beside him. He played a section filled with soft, flowing notes, then paused. "I want people to feel what I feel," he explained simply. "When I play, it's like telling a story without words." She smiled, brushing his hair back gently. "And you do it beautifully," she said. "You've always had this gift, even before anyone knew it." It was around this time that the billionaire reached out again. He had been organizing a small private concert, inviting a group of influential musicians, patrons of the arts, and educators. He wanted the boy to perform, but this time it would be different. Not a brief moment, but a real stage with lights, microphones, and a crowd that could notice every subtle nuance in his playing. The mother felt nervous. She had already seen her son perform once in a large hall, but this was bigger. More people. More expectation. The day of the concert arrived. The boy wore his neatest clothes, a simple shirt and trousers, and walked beside his mother as they entered the venue. The hall was grand, polished floors reflecting the lights above, seats lined up perfectly, and a stage that seemed enormous to a child. Musicians tuned their instruments, and a quiet buzz of conversation filled the air. Backstage, the boy sat quietly, his hands folded on his lap. The mother knelt beside him, whispering encouragement. "Remember, it's just you and the music. Don't think about the people. Just play what you feel," he nodded, taking a deep breath. He had learned to trust his instincts, to let the music guide him. When his name was called, he walked to the stage with careful steps. The audience fell silent, their attention drawn to the small figure standing confidently in front of the grand piano. As his fingers touched the keys, the first notes sounded soft and tentative. Then slowly the melody unfolded, rich, flowing, and full of emotion. The boy's music was no longer just a performance. It was a conversation, a story that filled the room. People leaned forward in their seats, drawn in by the honesty and purity of the sound. The mother watched from the side, tears forming in her eyes. She remembered the first time he had played in the cafe, how unsure he had been, and how a simple act of lifting him to the piano had changed everything. Now he was not only playing, he was expressing, connecting, and inspiring everyone who listened. The audience was mesmerized. The boy's music carried them through moments of quiet reflection and gentle excitement. It spoke of hope, struggle, and joy all at once. Musicians in the audience nodded in appreciation, some even closing their eyes, feeling the depth of his talent. When the final note lingered and faded into silence, there was a pause. Then applause erupted, soft at first, then louder, until the entire hall was clapping and cheering. People rose to their feet, some with tears in their eyes. The boy smiled shyly, looking toward his mother for reassurance. She clapped along, her heart swelling with pride. After the concert, many of the guests approached them, offering words of encouragement and invitations for future performances. The boy was asked to participate in workshops, collaborate with other young musicians, and even perform at charity events in different cities. Every opportunity seemed carefully chosen to help him grow without overwhelming him. The billionaire came backstage last, his calm presence grounding them both. He placed a hand gently on the mother's shoulder. "He did wonderfully," he said. "He has a way of speaking to people that is rare, even in adults. Keep nurturing that gift. It's something the world needs." The mother nodded, still speechless. She had watched her son grow from a quiet child in a small cafe to a young musician capable of touching hearts. She had no idea how to thank this man for giving them a chance she never dreamed of. In the weeks that followed, life became a rhythm of music, practice, and small victories. The boy studied daily, exploring new compositions, experimenting with melodies, and learning techniques that challenged him. He faced moments of frustration, of course. Some pieces were difficult, some days he felt tired or unsure, but he never gave up. His mother stayed by his side, encouraging him gently, reminding him of how far he had come. Their bond grew stronger. The boy shared his thoughts, his small worries, and his dreams. The mother listened, often amazed at the depth of his understanding and emotion. She realized that while music had given him opportunities, it was also teaching them both lessons about patience, courage, and trust. One quiet evening, the mother found him sitting at the piano alone, playing a melody that was soft and gentle. She sat beside him without a word, letting the music speak. After a few minutes, he looked up and said, "I want to write something for everyone who helped me. For you, for him, for everyone who believed in me." She smiled, brushing her hand over his hair. "That's a beautiful idea," she said. "And it will come from your heart. That's what makes it special." The billionaire remained a quiet presence in their lives, offering guidance without pressure. He arranged opportunities, connected them to teachers, and ensured the boy had everything he needed: instruments, sheet music, lessons. But he never forced him. The mother appreciated that. It felt less like a business arrangement and more like someone truly cared about their growth and happiness. Then came a moment that surprised them both. The billionaire invited them to his private home for an intimate gathering of musicians and patrons. This was different from the concert hall, smaller, more personal, with people who genuinely understood music. The boy was nervous, but he felt ready. At the event, he played once again, his fingers gliding across the keys with confidence. The audience listened, spellbound, some leaning in as if trying to catch every note. The boy's music told a story of struggle and love, of hope and resilience. When the final chord faded, the room erupted in applause, not just polite clapping, but genuine appreciation. The billionaire approached them afterwards, smiling. "He's remarkable," he said simply. "I've never seen someone connect with an audience this young and this deeply. The way he plays. It's rare." The mother felt a swell of pride she had never known. She looked at her son, who was blushing, hiding his hands behind his back. "You did it," she whispered. "You've come so far." He nodded, quiet and thoughtful. "I just play what I feel," he said. "That's all anyone could ask," she replied, hugging him tightly. From that day, their lives continued to shift. Invitations came from more events, more teachers, more opportunities to share his gift. The mother learned to navigate this new world, balancing guidance with allowing her son independence. She understood that while his talent was a gift, it was his heart, his perseverance, and his love for music that made him truly extraordinary. Through it all, they stayed humble, remembering the small apartment, the cafe, and the first time he had touched the piano. That moment had started it all, a simple act of love that had opened doors they never imagined. They knew the journey ahead was long, full of challenges and choices, but for the first time they felt ready, together. And somewhere in the background, quietly observing, the billionaire smiled. He had seen the spark the first night in the cafe, and now he saw it burning brighter than ever. It was rare to witness such talent, such heart, and such courage in a child. He knew that the world was about to see something truly extraordinary. Months passed, and the boy's journey continued to grow in ways no one could have imagined. Each day was filled with music, practice, and lessons that challenged him to be better than the day before. But it wasn't just his skills that were growing. His confidence, his understanding of emotion, and his love for the piano blossomed too. Every note he played carried not only sound but meaning, a connection between the music, himself, and everyone who listened. The mother watched him closely, still amazed at how far they had come. From a small cafe with barely enough money for rent to a world of music, opportunity, and encouragement. Their lives had been transformed by a single night, a single moment when she had lifted her son onto the piano bench. She had never expected that simple act of love would change everything. One day, a letter arrived from an international music festival. The organizers had seen the videos of his performances and wanted him to play in front of a large audience of musicians, critics, and enthusiasts from around the world. It was the biggest opportunity he had ever been offered. The mother felt a mixture of excitement and worry. Traveling, performing on such a big stage, it was intimidating for anyone, let alone a young child. The billionaire, who had remained a steady presence in their lives, reassured her gently. "He's ready," he said. "You've prepared him well. Trust him, and trust the music." The day of the festival arrived, and the boy stepped onto the enormous stage with the mother standing close by. The audience was vast, stretching far back, filled with people who had traveled from different countries. Cameras flashed, lights glowed, and the atmosphere was heavy with expectation. For a moment, the boy hesitated, looking at the crowd. His mother knelt beside him and whispered, "It's just you and the music. Tell your story like you always do." He took a deep breath and placed his fingers on the keys. The first notes were soft, careful, almost like a whisper, but then the music began to flow naturally. Each melody rose and fell, carrying emotion, memories, and imagination. It was not a rehearsed performance. It was storytelling through sound. The audience leaned in, mesmerized. Critics sat forward in their seats, listening intently. Some closed their eyes, letting the music fill them completely. The boy's music was no longer just a performance. It was an experience. It spoke of hope and struggle, joy and sorrow. It told a story of a small boy who had once waited in a corner of a cafe, dreaming of touching the keys of a grand piano. It was a story of a mother's love, of kindness from strangers, and of a gift that had been nurtured carefully without rush or expectation. The mother watched, tears streaming down her cheeks. She remembered the early days, the sleepless nights, the long shifts at the cafe, the nights when she worried about how they would survive. And now here he was, not just playing but touching hearts across the world. She squeezed his shoulder gently, whispering, "I'm so proud of you." By the time the final people rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, some even crying. The boy looked around, slightly confused by the attention. and then saw the billionaire sitting in the front row smiling proudly. He had been there from the beginning, quietly supporting them, guiding without controlling, giving the gift of belief along with opportunity. After the performance, the boy was invited backstage, where journalists, critics, and teachers wanted to meet him. They asked questions about his inspiration, his practice, and his feelings about music. The mother stood quietly nearby, still amazed at how much attention her son was receiving. She remembered the night in the cafe, the first notes he had played, and the simple joy on his little face. Everything had started from that moment, yet it had grown into something so much bigger. The billionaire approached them quietly. "You've done something extraordinary tonight," he said to the boy. "You've shown the world what it means to play from the heart." The boy smiled shyly. "I just played what I felt," he said softly. "That's all that matters," the billionaire replied. "The rest will follow." In the days that followed, the boy's story spread far and wide. Videos of his performance went viral, touching hundreds of thousands of people online. People were amazed not just by his skill but by the depth of emotion he conveyed. Articles praised him as a young prodigy, with the rare ability to connect through music, and invitations poured in from schools, orchestras, and festivals around the world. Despite all the attention, the mother and her son stayed grounded. They still lived simply, cherished quiet moments together, and never forgot the small beginnings in their little apartment. Music remained their bond, the center of their lives, and the way they communicated love and understanding. The mother continued to guide her son with gentle wisdom, letting him grow at his own pace. One evening, after a particularly long practice session, the boy sat quietly at the piano, his hands resting on the keys. The mother sat beside him, watching. "Do you remember the first time you played in the cafe?" she asked softly. He nodded. "Yes, I was nervous, but it felt right. I felt something I can't explain." "That feeling never goes away," she said, "and it will always guide you." He smiled, closing his eyes for a moment. "I want to play for people who need to hear music, not just to show them I can, but to make them feel something." She hugged him tightly, tears falling freely. "That's exactly what you're doing," she whispered. The billionaire visited them again, quietly observing the progress of both mother and son. He had always believed in small acts of kindness, in the ripple effect of generosity, and now he saw the results. A child's talent, nurtured carefully, had grown into something that could inspire a world. Finally, the day arrived for one of the boy's most significant performances yet, a grand concert hall filled with people who had come from all over. The mother stood backstage holding her son's hand, feeling the familiar mixture of pride and nervousness. She whispered, "Go, play with your heart, like you always do." The boy nodded, walking confidently to the grand piano. The lights dimmed, the audience fell silent, and the first note rang out. Music filled the hall, carrying every emotion he had ever felt: joy, sorrow, hope, love, and the journey of a life that had begun in a humble cafe. Every note resonated. People wept, smiled, and held their breaths. Musicians in the audience were moved to silence, recognizing not just skill, but heart. Critics later described it as a performance that could change how people thought about music, about expression, and about life itself. When the last note faded, the applause was thunderous. People stood, clapped, and cheered, some even calling for an encore. The boy turned toward his mother, his small hands trembling slightly from emotion. She smiled, clapping, tears streaming down her face. She realized that her son had achieved something greater than fame or recognition. He had touched the hearts of people who had never met him, and in doing so, had reminded everyone of the simple beauty of honest, heartfelt music. Afterward, backstage, the billionaire came to them, quietly placing a hand on the mother's shoulder. "You gave him the first chance," he said. "You believed in him. Look at what he's done." The mother nodded, speechless, overwhelmed with gratitude. Her son's journey had begun with her love, a small act of courage, and it had now reached the world. Years later, the boy continued to grow, performing on stages across the globe. Yet through it all, he remained the same, humble, kind, and connected to the music that had always been his voice. His mother stayed by his side, proud of the child who had once sat quietly in a cafe corner, dreaming of touching the piano keys, and the billionaire continued to watch quietly, satisfied that a single act of faith and kindness had created a ripple that changed countless lives. The story of a mother, a child, and a piano became more than just a tale of talent. It was a story about hope, belief, and the power of small, courageous acts. And it all began the night a waitress lifted her son to a piano and allowed him to play, a simple act that sparked a journey to inspire the world.